Hi, friends. This is CJ, Alejandro Bratti, and Shanei Born from Believe in Yourself and Believe in Your Business. And welcome to the Spanglish World Networks on Zingo TV, channel 250. Remember to download both the Zingo TV app and the respective app stores on iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment because the app is free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire and Fire TV sticks, Roku and Roku sticks, also on smart TVs ongoing. So Alejandro, I'm going to pass this off to you today to promote our special guest, Jeff, with us today.
Awesome. Jeff, thank you very much for accepting this invitation. We are really happy to have you here with us, and I'm really happy to have you here inside of your birthday. This is amazing. So happy birthday to you first. That is the first thing that we want to say to you.
What a great present.
Amazing.
So, Jeff, this process, this show is about your life. I know that you are going through a very big mission, helping people. Even I believe that it's families, not only the teenager or not only the parents, but both on improving their lives. So, I would love to start with your story first, from where you're coming from, even before all the things that you are going to share with us happen. So we start to understand, okay, who is Jeff? Then I know that you are going to tell us a little bit about your son and your family, what happened there. We are going to go deep on that area. But first, let's start with Jeff. Who is Jeff? Where are you coming from? What did you do to start to believe in yourself?
Well, listen, Shanei, CJ, Alejandro, thank you for being on Believe in Yourself, Believe in Your Business. This is an honor and a pleasure. 5 years ago, today's actually 6 years ago, because today I'm now 56 officially. I was 50 years old, on top of the world. I'd built up an investment company since the age of 23, happily married, my wife Prudence, 3 boys. Seth was our oldest, Ian was our middle, and Roman the youngest. 2 dogs and a cat, living in the heartland of America. Really, really hit the lottery. A lot of work to get there, but felt really like that I'd hit the lottery. And, life has a tendency when you're on the top, sometimes just to hit you right in the gut. And sometimes when you're on the bottom, something just pulls you right up. And I happened to be at the top, and it was a nice day here in Iowa. It was October 4th, 2016. And I was taking my middle son to a golf tournament. He's a competitive golfer, plays college golf right now. But at the time, he was 15 and a sophomore in high school. Just like any other parent across the country, across the world, taking their kids to youth sports, right? We all do that. The excitement in the air, we're all getting excited. And my wife's back at home getting ready to go out and watch Ian play. And as I took the clubs out of the trunk of the golf, out of my car, the phone rang. And I looked, it was 6:30 in the morning. I looked at the phone and I could see right then that I recognized the number, that it was probably not a good phone call. Little was I to know that it was the worst phone call a parent could get. I, that moment, joined a club that no parent asked to join, and one certainly I can never leave, and that's the death of a child. And they had found our son Seth at 23 years old in a seedy hotel room, I may add, just like you'd see in the movies, unfortunately. Overdosed with heroin that was laced with fentanyl. So in other words, he was poisoned. And my life froze, and part of me died at that moment. But as I spoke with Alejandro earlier, something was born as well, and I'll talk about that later. But you can imagine when you get that call, you just freeze and you're like, this isn't really happening. It's a horrible dream. And then I thought, how am I going to tell my wife our son is dead? And I turned around and got in the car and went home. And then I'll kind of fast forward through some things. All this is chronicled in my book. This one's for you, An Inspirational Journey Through Addiction, Death, and Meaning. But after I told my wife what had happened, which was the worst moment of my life, and then it dawned on me, well, I got to tell the 2 little brothers that their older brother's dead. How am I going to do this? So I called my dad and I said, Dad, what do I say? And my dad's a doctor. He's pretty pragmatic. And he said, Jeff, tell them the truth and then shut your mouth. He goes, you like to talk, let them ask questions. So I sat there, in my living room with my wife, dreading the moment the boys come home, and Roman gets off the bus. He's 13. Ian comes home from his golf tournament. He's 15. They sit down and I go, boys, I got some really bad news for you. And, you know, they thought maybe something, I don't know what they were thinking. And I said, your brother's dead. And they both just looked up at me like, you know, what the heck, Dad? You know, what are you saying? Is this a joke? And Ian, my middle son, goes, how'd he die, Dad? Drugs? I go, yeah, drugs. And I just paused, and you could just hear the tension in the air. And it was just, I don't know, it was beautiful and it was horrific at the same time. And then something happened, and I don't know where this came from, and I didn't rehearse it, and it was certainly not on my agenda, but I stood up and I thought to myself, okay, this is what you've been training for, Jeff, as a dad. These are those teachable moments. You're never going to get an opportunity to have this happen again. This is like your moment. And I thought to myself, okay, I got one chance to screw this up. I got one chance to just fumble the ball at the goal line. So I stood up and I said, boys, we have one of two roads to go down. We have one road of anger, despair, and hatred, and we'll become alcoholics and addicts ourselves. Or we have a road of inspiration and motivation. And this event can be the single greatest influence in our lives going forwards and those around us. I'm on the second road. I ask you to join me. And, you know, it's like I rehearsed it because it came off like really eloquent and honest and genuine. And boy, they really did. My two boys have just from that moment have been the rocks in my life. Advocates for mental health, advocates for substance abuse. My middle child raised $50,000 in high school through golf to benefit kids. So that was the beginning of a journey. And I'd like to say it got better, but it didn't. The first year after this happened, my wife and I just stayed home and figured out how we could drink ourselves under the table pretty much. And my alcoholism got worse. I'd been a functional alcoholic all the way up to this time. Since 8th grade, I've been drinking and never really got in trouble. I had one drunk driving in my early 90s, but you know, I ran a company with employees and it was okay. I also had a compulsive gambling problem in my 30s that I talk about in the book, but my wife and I just were going straight downhill. Then on December 24th of 17, I woke up and just said, okay, I'm tired of being tired. This is it. Kind of drew a line in the sand, really thinking that would get my wife to quit, you know, her drinking because it was going as bad as mine. But unfortunately, some mountains are just too high to climb, and the grief of Seth dying was too much. And I buried my wife last June at the age of 46, married 21 years, and she was such a beautiful person. And it rips my heart out to even talk to her in this context because it sounds like I'm being disparaging or critical, but I'm not. I love her a lot, immensely. But that's the reality of life, and that's how I need to present it so people cannot repeat the mistakes that we made. And so in a short amount of time after standing on the summit of life, I went from, you know, being on the bottom of the abyss, as I told Alejandro, with my back looking up, can't going any lower. And then something beautiful happened. You know, I decided to write a book. I started a nonprofit. I started a podcast. And then I got this project I'll talk about later that we're doing in a few months, or about a month. But I've learned a lot. I am a better man today than I was before this happened. I lost 40 pounds. I exercise. I meditate. I've done all these things to really stay ahead of the grief. But I think that's the story I wanted to share with you folks today, is that when you think you have it figured out, that's when sometimes life throws that reality check. And there's lots of teaching moments that I have benefited from this event. And I really believe no matter how bad something happens to you, if you frame it correctly, you can look at it as happening for you, your mindset. So I have to think that this happened for me to become a better person. And that's kind of how I live my life. And so that's a backdrop that gives you some context. And that's how Alejandro and I hooked up on social media, was through kind of sharing these stories.
Wow, Jeff. I know that this is, even as you were telling me when we started to talk about this, you always like go through a bad moment, even when you are talking about this, but at the same time, it's something that you want to help people to understand. This is really happening, and it's happening around, and there is a lot of people that is suffering this type of things, as parents, as kids, as siblings, as like other things that is happening. So tell me a little bit more about that moment that you had those two roads to take
Mhm.
a decision, because that is exactly what everybody needs to listen when they are here. If they are going through something traumatic like what you are sharing, or even if it's not that traumatic, at the end you always have a choice and you have to decide what you are going to do next. So I want to know more about that moment before you decided. Okay, you at the beginning you're not thinking that you have choices.
Right.
Like, okay, this happened to me and I didn't realize that was going to happen.
Yeah.
How you started to think like, okay, now I can see that there is two choices. Let's decide those roads. How was that process?
It's a great question. And that's why I named my nonprofit the Choices Network, was because it was, how do you make difficult choices in challenging situations? And so going back to that moment, now in hindsight, so I have the benefit of analyzing this scenario in hindsight. There really isn't two roads. There's not two choices. There's one, because the bitter road isn't a road I want to be on. So that road's closed down to me. I go down it for a couple blocks. I come running back to the better road. So to me, I metaphorically, when I explain this to people, I envision the two roads going on, but my choice was always going to be the better road. It just took me a year or so to get there. So I do challenge people to really think about this, that there really is only one road, because the other road just is not a road we want to go down. That's misery and despair and anger, and we drink ourselves and we do drugs and we lie and we steal and we just live unhealthy lives. And it's like, you've got to find a way to go to the better road. So that's a great question. I've again, having the benefit of hindsight, I've reframed it a little bit in my head. I've learned that during this process, guys, that no matter how smart you think you are, you can always trick your brain to believe anything. And so I've got certain narratives in my mind, like when I quit drinking, I just quit drinking. I mean, to me, it was that simple. I'm not sober. I'm not an alcoholic. I just quit drinking. And I just choose not to drink today. On my birthday, I'm not going to drink today. I don't know about tomorrow. I got to live there first. But I think too many alcoholics get so consumed with counting their days, counting their moments, and it really becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy that they're going to fall off the wagon because they talk about their conquest so much. And I haven't beaten alcohol. I just don't drink. I mean, I play a game. I was telling Alejandro this. I play a game that's kind of a perverse game, and I'm not sure that people in 12 steps want to do this, but this is how my brain works. When I go out, now that I'm widowed, I'm by myself, I go out on dinner dates with me, and I'll order wine, and the waiter or waitress will come up, and I'll say, I want to get the best expensive glass of Cabernet that you have, without buying a whole bottle. And she'll pour a glass and put it in front of me. I'll eat my meal. I'll talk. I'll watch TV, be on my phone. The bill will come, and she'll say, always, every time, I have to ask, how is your wine? And I'll just look up and say, I don't drink. That's it. And they look perplexed. I don't tell them why. And I can imagine they go back to their people going, I got the strangest thing just happened. And now they're having a dialogue. And now they know there's something going on with this guy out there. But I do this to laugh at alcohol because it's taken so much from me in my life. I'm not going to give it the pleasure of being in my body. And that's my mindset. So I have really a lot of empathy for people that struggle with alcoholism, because I don't. And I was one. And again, I just think I've tricked my brain to really convince myself that it's a choice. And I know a lot of doctors will say, you're crazy, Jeff, it's a disease. Well, my brain doesn't know that. You may tell everybody it is, and everyone that follows your methodology may believe that, but this guy doesn't, and this brain doesn't. And that's all that matters to me at this point. So there's got to be more people like me and more people like us out there that have just figured out convenient ways to not play these narratives that are being presented in mainstream today when it comes to specifically alcohol. So I want to kind of upset the apple cart with mental health. I want to change the narrative, start talking about these from a different lens. And hopefully together, all of us, my new 3 friends here, we can start to improve people's lives, because what we're doing isn't working. It's very clear, evident in the evidence that what we're doing is not working.
And there is a lot of things that you are talking about here, because talking about mindset and how do you think that it's going to really move your game and move everything that is happening. And but before I continue working on that area, I also have the same question in regards of the 2 choices. I know that you said it's only one, but one right now I want to ask you from the perspective of the other people that you needed to tell them, your kids and your wife. How you use your empowerment, how you empower yourself
Right.
to, okay, I am the person that have to lead something that nobody knows how to lead. Nobody is going to teach you about that, because that is not exactly something that anybody wants to teach. Okay, if your son dies, this is going to happen, and you have to do
Right.
this and this.
Right.
That is not something that really anybody is preparing themselves. So how you started to become that leader in your house, to start to tell them, okay, we have 2 choices, which one do you want to decide? How you move people to decide what you were choosing for?
Well, great question again. And telling people what to do or how they live their lives has never worked with humans and never will. You have to show them. So to me, it wasn't about telling my kids, don't drink, don't smoke. I would just sit back and say, look what happened to people that you care about. You know, the evidence is right there. If you drink and smoke, then I don't know what to tell you, because you lost a brother and a mom. So, you know, am I worried about those 2? No, not at all. Would they end up drinking? I don't know. It's a choice they'll have to make. But they're seeing their dad, and the last thing they need right now is their dad to fall apart. That's the last thing they need. And, you know, for whatever I have to do to trick my brain, whatever I have to do to believe, to read, to meditate, to meet great people like you guys that are advocates for these things, I will do that until my last breath. But I certainly don't want to overthink this as well. I don't have to make this as more complicated than it has to be. I'm so busy cultivating new friendships and new relationships, I don't have time to drink. You know, I don't have time to really even be depressed. Although I think I talked to you, Alejandro, about what happened over Christmas that maybe later in the show we can talk about. But it's constant for me. If I have to stay in this mode of work, or I run the risk of falling back. And I'm as fallible as anybody here today, anybody watching and listening to you guys. I'm just as human as they are. And we talked about something earlier about, you know, grief. It's like people see my story and they're like, wow, I can't compete with that. You know, I put my cat down, or my dad died. It's like, but still for you, that's the same level of grief that I'm going through. So we need to stop almost sometimes comparing each other's tragedies and griefs, and like feeling guilty because I hurt more because my cat got put down than maybe Jeff does that his son died. But the reality is each person's grief is unique to their own story. And we need to embrace that and help each other by sharing our own stories. I think there's some really beauty in being vulnerable.
Yeah.
So Jeff, I'm curious about going back even a few steps further about perhaps the intersection of grief and mental health. You shared about, you know, your success leading up to this point, and you know, just really doing well, and you know, building your business. Obviously, you had to have a belief in yourself to believe in your business and to grow, and to get to that point where you were thriving. But you mentioned along the way that, you know, you did drink along the way, and it was just something that you didn't nurse more than, you know, when you hit grief. So I'm wondering if you recognize anything for yourself, whether you dealt with, even though you had success, if there was anxiety or depression, because I think it's really important to have the discussion on mental health. And then, you know, when you hit grief on top of that, there's really a compound effect. So I'm wondering if leading up to that, perhaps not at the time, you may not have recognized it, but in hindsight, was there something that you'd say that you were dealing with that, you know, when it hit grief, it just kind of let, you know, the cat loose, if you will, and
Yeah, I think, like I said, the benefit of hindsight now, I can look back like my life as a big science experiment and learn from it. And one thing that I've always had is attention deficit. And one of my change the narrative goals in my life is to talk about some of these labels and stigmas that are perpetuated out there. And one is attention deficit. It's not a disorder. It shouldn't be called a disorder. If every doctor wants to call it a disorder, my kids don't have to believe it's a disorder. And again, that's all I care about. And so that's just one example of like a stereotype or a stigma and a label. But going back to the intersection, like with grief, I think there are some fundamental mindsets in place that can help us get through these things when they inevitably happen. I mean, we're all going to get that call. It may not be your son or daughter. It could be your spouse. It could be your mom or dad. But we're all going to get that call. I mean, it's 100% guaranteed we're going to get that call. But I think there's some foundations that we can have in place that can help us deal with this when it happens in advance. And I've come up with these three. It's called the living undeterred mindset. And this goes, CJ, right in hand to what your question was about the intersection. Is the first kind of foundation is expectations. It's our realistic. Do we have realistic expectations about life? And one of it is death. I mean, death is part of life, and we run through life aware of death, but almost naive that it can actually happen to us. When knowing it's 100% probability going to happen to us and the people we care about. But we don't run through life with that lens. We live in a fairy tale, like, it's going to happen to everybody else. And then all of a sudden your son dies or your husband or wife, and you're just devastated. I was devastated. But as I learn now, as I go back and peel back the layers, I had a fairly different set of expectations on death even before this happened. So we can talk about that later. The second thing is preparation. How do you preparing yourself for the inevitability of bad things happening? So, the Cub Scouts or the Boy Scouts here say, expect the best, prepare for the worst. So when you go camping, you really want to expect to have a good time, but you bring your rain stuff, you bring your backup batteries, you prepare. Well, we don't do that as humans. We just get up and sit on the couch and watch Netflix and maybe work out, maybe eat some healthy food, but we don't prepare our minds. And so preparation for me is meditation, reading, writing, my podcast, conversing with other humans. And then the biggest thing for me, I try to teach youth and even adults is toxic relationships, cutting toxic relationships out of your life. So part of preparation is unloading that baggage that holds you back. So then when your child dies or your husband or your dad or mom, whatever, somebody close to you dies, you're not being distracted in your grief, with other people that are negative or people that are alcoholics or people that are dragging you down, and so expecting realistic things, preparing for these things. And then the third one is evolution. And that's just evolving yourself through the trials and tribulations of life. And, I am not the same person that I was 30 minutes ago before I joined you guys. I've bettered myself just meeting you three. Or two of you I met the first time. I've known Alejandro now. So, but I'm a better person. I've evolved. Part of me moved on. It's like when Seth died, something was born. When Prudence died, something was born, And even if it's not, shouldn't we believe that? I mean, even if that's not true, but believing it is probably more important than whether it's true or not. So I really believe that you can be born. Something better can be born when somebody very close to you passes. And so again, that's just death, but there's so many different ways that expectations, preparation, and evolution can help us. So those are things, CJ, I think can help people when that intersection of like life and grief comes together and you get those calls. There is no script. There's no textbook, like you were saying. I wish there was, because I would have went to it a million times. Even if I wrote one, it wouldn't apply to anybody else really other than me. So it's whatever tools and things you can find in coping with these things is probably what my mission is. My life's purpose is to explore alternative ways to deal with these things.
And Jeff, you said earlier that you help people to get out of toxic relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Because in today's day and age, especially with everything that's going on now, people are more at home, and
Mhm.
those toxic relationships get extremely toxic, and it's very, very saturated.
Mhm.
How do you escape such a situation or even such a person? How would you help someone?
Great question. I wish it was such an easy answer, but I think that for me, what works, and again, I'm not suggesting this for everybody. I don't watch any TV. That's first off. I haven't had TV on my house in years. If it is, it's Netflix, and I have certain key people that I follow on social media that I go to get kind of a synopsis, a summary of what's important. So when the elections are going on over here, I don't watch all that stuff. I just kind of get a summary. So I've kind of limited the amount of toxicity that's put at me. People I follow on social media are for the most part, inspirational, motivational people. I don't follow confrontational people that are posting things and flaming, people's angers. So I've kind of, Shanei, I've kind of got to my point where I've barricaded myself in this little bubble, and I've kept out all these emotional vampires that are trying to take from me. And when it comes to friends, I'm at 56 years old. I'm not going to beg for friends anymore. And I'm certainly not going to work really hard to get new ones. I've been widowed for 9 months, but I was pretty much widowed previous to that for a while. So I'm kind of used to being by myself, but I'm surrounded by so much love, and my conversations I'm having every day with people is really what's keeping me going, keeping me alive. My two boys, I'd have to say, is probably the main reason why I'm here. My two boys. But yeah, you're right, Shanei. I don't know what to tell people other than they need to get rid of toxic relationships. But the process to do it, whatever works, I guess. I think, probably getting it severed, that relationship, before it gets too toxic would be good. But then what are the signs? What are the red flags? It's a tough one. That's a great question. I don't know. I don't know if you have, CJ, maybe you guys have thoughts on her question, because that's a really good question about trying to avoid toxic relationships.
Well, I mean, I don't have any thoughts on once you're in it. I mean, I think that's a longer discussion, and I think outside of the scope of what we can handle here personally. But I think getting into it, I was just thinking about when we're the sum of the 5 closest people we spend time with, and the intentionality of going into positive relationship and building and who we are in community. We had a comment come in from LinkedIn by Ryan saying talking to intelligent people is the key, and that therapy can happen all day, every day with enlightened folks. And I think that touches number 3 that you touched on, was that evolution and that intentional growth piece of being with people who you build up, because you also have to live a life of Kaizen, which is a Japanese principle of continuous improvement, and being a mensch, which is continuously meaning to grow and being intentional about it, 1% better every day, which doesn't seem like a lot, but if you veer a plane off 1 degree on their course, they're going to end up, depending on the length of flight, in a very different place, right? So if we're intentional about our relationships and honed in on that, I think that's going to fare much better for ourselves, I think, in the long run. I don't know if there's something that you'd want to add to that, Jeff, but I'd be definitely a pleasure to hear that.
I love the intentional word, doing things with intention, instead of like being in reactive mode all the time, or even being proactive is an overused term, because intention means you have set of ideas behind it, what's the ultimate goal. And so, yeah, I like that. I don't have a whole lot to add on what you just said, but I think that having any type of goal or objective, but having genuine, authentic intentions behind it, good things, there's more upside in those scenarios than there is downside.
Yeah. And I think also, if whoever is listening, and sometimes people need to hear this, but if you are intentional about getting away from toxic people, you will help yourself so much just to get out of that situation. Because if you keep going on in that situation, it's not only the situation that gets more toxic, you start to lose yourself, and then you're at a point of no return. and then you start going into survival mode and start doing things that's out of your character. So I think that it's very important to stay within character, get the help that you do need, and be intentional about that, because you are the only person in your life who can decide to go on or to break free.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. And this brings up the interesting dynamic of enabling in the substance abuse and addiction world. Because, you know, I went through this with my son. We kicked him out of our house a number of times. You know, I loved him to death. I dropped him off downtown in the winter with $100 bill, you know, because I couldn't let him back in the house with my two boys and my wife. You know, we were having our own problems at the time. And so I kind of take that element of guilt with me the rest of my life. You know, maybe I could have been a better dad. Maybe I could, but you know, where do you draw the line between tough love? A toxic relationship can be a relative. I mean, more times it probably is than not. So how do you kick a relative out of your life? It's one thing kicking out a high school friend or a college friend, but how do you kick your brother or your spouse out of your life? Or your spouse may be a little different. You just get divorced, but you can't really divorce your family, you know, kids and stuff like that. So I ran into that with Seth a lot, is like, you know, what's my obligation as a dad? You know, is it unconditional love? Which, by the way, I don't like that term. I wrote a blog on this because I don't believe unconditional love is a healthy relationship, because the insinuation is that it's a one-way relationship. You can take advantage of me forever and I'm still going to love you. And I don't think that's healthy for me. So I came up with this limitless love idea that I've been promoting. I have limitless love for you until you take advantage of me, until that becomes a one-way street. It's give and take right now. You take advantage of me a number of times, then I got to start cutting it off. And people can call that's not unconditional love. Well, it is for me. And do I feel guilty that my son died 60 days after he got out of prison and he asked to live in our house? And I said no. I mean, do I feel responsible for his death? Absolutely not. I don't. Should I? No. Because the template was set prior to that every time he came back to the house, something bad happened. So if I would have done that, then who knows what would have happened? Maybe some of his friends doing drugs would have broken, tried to rob us. I mean, there's all these scenarios that play out. But it didn't happen. I kicked him out, lovingly kicked him out, because I loved my other kids equally. And he was dead within 60 days. So, you know, as a dad, I struggle with that. You know, did I let him down? And you can see I'm getting emotional right now because I have to take that with me the rest of my life. But I guarantee you the same scenario, I would do the same thing again. And that makes my grief, that makes my guilt go away if I would repeat the same thing over again. And going back to the original thing, Shanei, was on enabling kind of, you know, toxic relationships. So what happens if it's your son or your daughter? What do you do there? Well, I tell you what I did. He's not here anymore. So I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know, guys. I think you got to do what's in your heart. You got to do what's best for the other members of your family. And there's specifically a reason on a plane when there's turbulence and the oxygen comes down and the flight attendant says, put the oxygen on your face first before your kids or your loved ones. Because what good are you if you're dead? So yeah, there's so many moving parts here, guys. I wish I could say knowingly do this, do that. But, and I, you know, probably if there is a reincarnation and I come back and I'm in the same scenario, maybe I do the same things and the outcomes are different. I don't know.
It might be.
What's that?
It might be. You never know, because situations and people are delicate.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't predict what other people will do. They're in their own body and they're responsible for their own actions. We can't be held responsible for other people's actions. That's a fact.
And one thing I would throw in there, because I know people watching are probably curious, how did my son start down this road? He actually was given Adderall at 16 for attention deficit, same that I have. I never took anything. My dad was a doctor and he never gave me, he just said, little Jeffy, go out and run around the woods and play cowboys and Indians, whatever. And that's what we did, you know, but I never got good grades, never made honor roll. My mind was always other places. And that really helped me in my business world because I was hyper focused. And then we built a $700 million AUM financial management firm from scratch, you know, and I'm not even tech savvy for that matter. I just surround myself around people that were really good at the things I'm not good at, you know? And so going back to with Seth, doctor said, hey, you're hyper. Here's a pill. You know, you're going to turn into a werewolf at midnight. So take this pill and you'll kill the werewolf. And that's BS. That's criminal in my mind. That is absolutely criminal. Instead of saying, Seth, you're intense, you're focused, it's a superpower, you're an Avenger, you're going to take over the world, dude. That's not the way that we present it to kids anymore. We give them this pill because it's going to get them to settle down. They don't fit the norms of society. So don't get me going on Adderall, and so Seth started doing alcohol, marijuana, and cocaine, and then the rest led to heroin with fentanyl. And that was his story over 6 years. So a long 6 years.
Okay, Jeff, quick question in regards of what you are doing now and where is your heart right now? Is helping kids understanding what happened if you are going through these type of things, or talking to parents, or both? What are you doing now?
Well, I'm happy you brought that up because we're doing something pretty unique. Last year, I was having a really tough time deciding if this was something that I could maintain. I just didn't feel like I was doing enough. I had a book, I had a podcast, I was an activist, or an advocate, let's say. I just didn't feel like I was doing enough. So I had this idea that I would buy an RV, drive around the United States for 95 days with my 2 boys and raise $1 million for mental health, substance abuse, and addiction. I had the idea on a Tuesday. Next day, I drove up to Camping World, which is a big RV company here in the States, and bought a 34-foot RV, came home, told everybody I was doing this, and the rest is history. So in 30 days, I'm going on the Living Undeterred U.S. tour. For 95 days, we're going around the United States. We're raising $1 million. I have 40 states already on board to partner with us. And I have 5 people on my team that are helping us. And this all started with some crazy idea that I wasn't doing enough. And now it's like this thing is just blown up, and the viral effect of social media has really helped. And now we have 5 people on board. We have 40 states. Some of the stops, the state partners we have, the stories are amazing. I mean, absolutely amazing. And I got 60 of these that I'm going to be doing. So think how the effect it's going to be on my life. You know, if I can't become 10 times the person I am today by being around all these humans telling me their intimate stories about perseverance and adversity and struggles and love and empathy and strength, then what am I doing? You know, if I can't better myself. And so I'm taking my boys with me. We're going to raise as much money as we can. We're going to meet as many people as we can. We're giving back 50% of the money to all the state partners that support us. And the other 50% is going in my nonprofit, the Choices Network. And I want to do this the rest of my life. This is I don't like the word calling, but this is kind of what I figured out I want to do. And the tour is going to be a really innovative way for us to really get our boots on the ground, because it's one thing to sit and feel like I'm being productive, you know, maybe behind a computer screen or behind writing with a pen, but out shaking hands and hugging and crying, and people telling me about their sons and daughters and their neighbors. And I can't even tell you how awe-inspiring this is going to be. So I told Alejandro, I'm going to write a book called 50 Stories in 50 States. And I want to pick out one amazing story that's life-changing, but have 50 of those back to back to back to back. So when people read this book and they put it down, they're going to say, wow, my life's not that bad. My life's actually pretty good. Even though I lost a son and a wife and my mom, I've still got some good things going for me. And that's really the way we have to look at this. You know, you got one chance, you got one life.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know of any other way it's productive to look at things, but it's taken me a while to get here. I'm not going to lie to you guys. What you see isn't what just happened overnight. You know, it's taken me a long time, and I've got a long time ahead of me of staying on top of this so I don't fall back.
But it's incredible. Yeah, go ahead, Shanei.
Sorry, Jeff, how can people donate? How can we help you create awareness and donate?
Yeah, our website is www.livingundeterred.org. And that's the site. It's pretty simple, www.livingundeterred.org. And people can click on that. They can, if they want, they can order the book. The profits going to my nonprofit. They can donate right there. I can tell you right now, this tour is much more expensive than I thought when I started this thing. And I committed everybody up front, every penny I have to make this work. And so certainly people's donations will help us at a minimum pay for expenses so we can drive the RV around the country for 95 days and do what we want to do. And the hope is that we make a lot more than the expenses so we can donate back that to the states that partner with us. But the website, Shanei, is the easiest, www.livingundeterred.org.
Okay. All right. And then how can we help you get the word out? What would your thoughts be around that?
Well, this type of format is great. Being able to talk to people, in this case, 3 different countries, that's amazing. I mean, the 4 of us, think of the amount of people that we can impact by just 45-minute conversation. So I think sharing and posting and letting your contacts know that I'm available to go on podcasts. I mean, even though I host a podcast, I'm actively on a lot, and that's fun, like this one, because I get to share our story and talk about my passions. So that's one way. Getting me on podcasts would be awesome. And then just conversation, just keep talking, keep meeting people, keep sharing the stories, and that's the best way. I think, I don't know if you guys know who Johan Hari is.
No.
He's an addiction expert, guru, what are you going to call him? He's got one of the most watched TED Talks ever on addiction. It's Johan Hari, Hari, I think. Hari. But his book is Chasing the Scream, and it's on the war on drugs, the colossal failure on the war on drugs, how it's just been terrible. And he's got this thing that he kind of came to, this consensus, is that the opposite of addiction. So if I were to ask you guys, and you can't because I think, Alejandro, you know the answer, but the opposite of addiction is what? What are most people going to say?
I don't even know.
Well, sobriety, let's say. The opposite of addiction would be sobriety or being clean, right?
Okay.
He says it's connectivity, connection. He says that's the antithesis of addiction. And you got to thinking about that. I thought, that could be true. Maybe the answer to all this addiction is more human interactions, more connection, more sharing of our stories, because medicine isn't helping. Isolation isn't helping. Alcohol is not helping. None of that's helping. So maybe it's more like what you guys are doing, having these conversations.
Yeah, and connecting with the right people. Because if you connect with the wrong people, it's like a crab in a bucket.
I love that one, by the way. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, it's so important to connect with the right people because that will propel you forward and they will elevate you and support you every step of the way. That's really important.
Yeah, I mean, there are some reoccurring themes every time you talk to somebody that's, and if I sat and talked to you 3 long enough, you certainly would share with me your vulnerable stories that you guys have. I mean, we all 4 probably could write a book, just us 4, on things that happen in our lives. And so I think encouraging people to start that vulnerability. I don't know how much time we have, but do you have a few minutes for me to tell you a quick story?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I was on an airplane flying from Denver to Iowa, and I'm on the aisle. And, with COVID, you have your masks on. And halfway through, we hit some turbulence, and my cell phone fell out of my pocket into the aisle. And a lady was next to me. She's probably about my age. We hadn't talked at all. And she reached over and picked up the cell phone, handed it to me. And so I just said, thank you. And, what's your name? Are you coming to Cedar Rapids? Is that your home? It was Denver, your business. You know how you do the dialogue, the dance on an airplane just to pass time. And then she said, what's your name? I said, oh, my name's Jeff. What's your name? She said her name. I don't remember. And then I asked her, well, what do you do? And she told me what she did. And then she asked the question that I shudder for people when they ask because I can't stop talking. She goes, "What do you do?" And I'm like, I think to myself, "Uh-oh, she shouldn't have asked me that because we still have an hour. We still have an hour to go on the flight." So I go around and talk to people about making better choices in difficult situations. That's what I do. That's my full-time job. And you could see her eyes perk up. And then all of a sudden I go, my son died of an overdose, one to my wife, and her mask was up here. I could see her eyes filling up with water. Now we never met 2 minutes prior to this. And her eyes are filling up. So naturally my eyes start filling up. And I don't know if I said something that really made her mad or if she was just really, really involved in this story. So I tell her about my son, tell her about my wife, tell her about my nonprofit. And then she reaches over. This is just gives me chills. And she grabbed my arm and she goes, "Jeff, are you okay?" Because I'm crying, because I cry all day long. And her eyes are all watery. And I said, "Yeah, believe it or not, I'm in a better place, not a bitter place, blah, blah, blah." And then I go, "How are you?" And she goes, "I'm not doing too good. I'm in recovery. I fell off the wagon a couple of weeks ago. My husband abused me. I don't remember if it was son or brother, but someone had a relative that had died, overdosed." And as we're talking, and this is the beauty of the story, isn't her and I, but the person in front of her had their computer shut off and was leaning back. The person behind her had their phone off, was leaning forward. I assume the people in front of me were doing the same thing. So as I'm talking to her, all four people now were engaged. They weren't talking, but they were actively listening to us talk. And I have to think, when the plane landed and they got up and we started sharing and hugging and crying and people are grabbing their luggage and we're like at a networking seminar, and I walked off the plane going, that's it. That's the beauty of vulnerability. And it all started with the phone getting dropped and me asking, "What do you do?" And then she asked me back. And that can be repeated in every house, on every street, in every city, in every town, in every state, in every country in the world. Imagine those conversations happening. How many people could be uplifted into better places in their lives? Just by that. No meds, no meditation, no nothing. Just me starting to be vulnerable. And that can be done by anybody. That's free. There's something really beautiful about that.
And that is huge, Jeff, because, for example, in our case, the reason for this program is believe in yourself, believe in your business. I know that we're helping entrepreneurs and business owners to improve their lives and the things that they are doing. But exactly what you are talking about here is like, okay, you can be starting, you can be in the middle, or you can be at the top of the mountain right now, like being the best one ever and the best thing that you can ever imagine. But at the same time, something can happen in 1 minute and everything changes in your lives. And once again, goes back to, what is your belief system? What are you believing in yourself? Are you believing or not? And one thing, I agree 100% with what you are saying. We are having workshops every week and we are having challenges, helping people to improve. And exactly when we finish that part, we are always like, if we are vulnerable and start to share, like, even like, okay, I'm helping you about lead generation, but at the same time, I want to tell you that sometimes, even when I am the expert in lead generation, some things doesn't work in one country, because I have to figure it out how it works in that country. So being vulnerable, again, people connects with that. So what you are saying, that's the reason for this show. It's exactly being vulnerable, knowing that we are people, and you can go from that humanity to another level just because people start to be attracted to that. And I feel really attracted to you, exactly the same thing that you are sharing. I have two little kids. I don't have anybody with the same type of problems, but at the same time, I feel like, okay, I agree, there is a lot of things to do in this world, and if we can help with that 1% of 0.1% or something to improve it, we are doing our job here. So that's the reason for this show. That's the reason for inviting you. I hope that we can have you very soon. And I will ask you something even here, but if we can have this type of show in the middle of your 90 days. That would be
That'd be
amazing.
awesome. That'd be awesome.
Because that will be like, okay, tell us a little bit about the boots on the ground, like knowing what is happening behind.
Let's plan on that, because our RV is going to have full hookup. I'm doing live streams. I'm going to do my podcast on the fly. Let's plan on it. You, Molly, can talk to you, Alejandro, and you guys can set that up. But that'd be so awesome, like halfway through to do an hour.
Yeah,
kind
or
of
do a
follow-up.
couple of them, because I know that it's going to be changing even your life in the meanwhile.
Yeah.
The process is going to be like, okay, Jeff right now it's completely different from the Jeff that we're going to know in 1 month, and in 2 months it's going to be completely different again, because you are doing something bigger than you, and you are attracting people bigger than you, and you are going to start to connect really amazingly.
Well said.
So, Jeff, we are almost at the end of the show.
Mhm.
I would love to ask you something. If people really didn't connect with something, or they are like, okay, wow, I'm shocked on all these stories and everything that happened.
Mhm.
If you want to leave them with one thing, one phrase, one area that they have to think about, what is that thing?
The thing is this: when you find your why, you'll find your way. And every single human being has a why. I don't know what it is. You may not know what it is. It may reveal itself after the show. It may reveal itself tomorrow at noon. It may have already revealed itself. You just haven't realized it yet. But we all have a why. And when you find that why, and this is not a religious statement. This is just a human statement. When you find your why, you'll find your way. I mean, it's like the doors open and you just see where you're going. And for me, it took 2 really bad things to happen, on top of my mom dying. So 3 deaths in a 4.5 year time span. I soon realized that money and status and fame and all that was not my why. My why right now is clearly for me to help other people find their why, and that's what we're doing through this project. We're on the Living Undeterred project. And you're right. I'm not going to come back the same person from the tour. I may never come back. I told people. I'm meeting so many awesome people. It's just very exciting to get up every day.
Awesome. So thank you everyone for today. Thank you, Jeff. You were so vulnerable and so amazing. So I really hope that we can help you a lot. And I know that we are going to be working together. I will be in your show also. So the idea is to be helping people to understand more and connect more with what you are doing and become better. So everybody, tomorrow we have another workshop. If you want to join us, just connect with any of us in LinkedIn or any of our social media, or you can go to businessbelieve.com, and that's you are going to go directly to our workshop tomorrow. It's about lead generation. Thank you, everyone, today. This show can be also heard on the Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out spanglishworld.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, guys.